morning or good afternoon, depending on where in the world you're signing in from today. Appreciate your time very much. We're joined today by Dr. Fletcher Morgan, TDG Gold's CEO and Director, and Stephen Kramar, the company's Vice President of Exploration. Gentlemen, how are you this morning?
Yeah, thanks very much for letting us be here today. We're really excited.
Awesome. Yeah, looking forward to it. So for folks in the room, here's how today's going to work. Dr. Fletcher and Stephen are going to go through a presentation outlining recent news, and then I have some questions for both of them just to wrap up today's event. If you do have a question for the team, I'll make sure that we send out where you can contact them so you can reach out with any follow-up questions. I'm sure they'll get back to you as quickly as possible. Last piece of housekeeping before we get into the protein. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available for live replay in the mid-afternoon Eastern time. It will be available on both our YouTube channel, but also on 6.com's event page. Without further ado, I'll pass it to Dr. Fletcher and Stephen to get us started with the presentation today.
Thanks very much. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Some of the slides we're going to be going through, we have gone through before in other presentations. We are hoping to make this one of a series of webinars that we'll be organizing as things get exciting as we head towards the field season. As was mentioned, I'm joined here today by my Dow colleague, Stephen Kramar, who will be stepping you through more of the technical slides. I myself, just a quick intro to me, Fletcher Morgan, CEO and Director. I've been involved in TDG since its inception. We acquired the land package from Talisker Resources back in 2020. It's been an interesting 4 years to say the least. We woke up on January the 17th this year and the world had changed for us. And so we're pleased to be able to step you through today. We do have some questions that we're going to be answering at the end. And like I said, if we can make this one of a series, then we'll be pleased to carry you with us as we move into what could end up being the most exciting field season of our short existence. I'm going to put up the slide deck and appreciate if people will just bear with me. I hope everyone can see that. So TDG Gold, we're located in the Tudagon district of north central BC, and we're now strategically placed for copper, gold, and silver discovery. I will be making forward-looking statements. I do encourage everyone to hit pause on the recording and read these. Specifically, we will be covering some of the information and results related to a neighboring discovery, the Aurora discovery, made by Freeport-McMoRan and Amart Resources. And so you are encouraged to exercise due diligence and caution when hearing information that we'll be presenting today. I just want to provide a very quick corporate snapshot. Currently, just under 177 million shares issued and outstanding, fully diluted 205 million. Most of our options and warrants are in the money. The warrants don't have acceleration provisions. That gives us cash and receivables on balance sheet at the moment, just under 16 million. Market cap, it tends to change. I think we're closer to around 80 to 85 million dollars right now, trading at around 44, 45 pennies. So just below the price that we did our most recent capital raise, which obviously, as people are aware, involved Skeena Resources getting involved. Skeena owns just over 13% of TDG. Natural resources funds, mainly precious metal focused, own around 24%. We've seen some institutions change over the last few weeks as the information got out there of that gold-rich copper porphyry discovery on our boundary. I think the percentage is probably a little bit higher than that, but those are the numbers that we're confident about. And that's matched by management insiders' ownership of around 13%. And the rest is distributed amongst private family offices, high net worth individuals, and retail owners. I've got 5 key takeaways from today. I'm not going to be going through them in tremendous detail, but the first statement is about the vision. We've always suspected that Great Air, Shasta, Newbury, and our Trident target were likely part of a much bigger system. We've been saying it consistently. The Aurora discovery for us acts as a proof of concept of that. And we're excited to get up now with that new information and start reinterpreting and advancing our exploration on a larger scale than we've been able to in the past. We do have expertise on hand. Some of it is world expertise. This bigger potential that we're seeing means bigger programs, and the Skeena Gold and Silver investment takes us big strides in the right direction. A lot of work to do, but obviously the dollars that we've now got can be focused on that bigger potential. And the opportunity, really the backdrop has improved in terms of the renaissance that we're seeing in British Columbia with regards to critical minerals and critical mineral exploration. And you could look at the gold and silver now as a bonus towards that. And really, one of the most exciting things is the Tudagon as a district has it all. And this is one of the key points that I want to emphasize. We do have an existing mineral resource estimate at our Shasta mineral deposit. It's gold and silver. We do have existing infrastructure, And what we'd like to emphasize to people is that gives investors some downside protection. We were beavering away in the background, advancing Shasta, and we'll get into this, but we've always envisaged could be over 2 million ounces. And we see no reason to change that in light of the Aurora discovery. In actual fact, we're looking for ways to accelerate towards that. But the existing resource we've always maintained is economic. We've never had the benefit of so many dollars that we could afford to just strike for everything. We've always focused on what we considered would be economic ounces. And we believe that the indicated and inferred resource that we've got at Shasta already is economic and has some other advantages that we expect to bring to the market over the coming months. And people will start to see, I think what we're seeing is that this is an economic resource that really at some point should go into production, ideally now as part of something a lot bigger. And then our upside is through discovery. We've got multiple targets. We've got near-term catalysts. Everything should be beginning in May, and my colleague Stephen will get into that. And we're funded for this next and really important stage of work. And so just a few more slides from me before I hand over to Stephen to get really into the technical aspects. The technical team. We're blessed that our chair, Stephen Quinn, is a mine builder. My colleague, Michael Koswan, is a mining engineer. But I want to focus today on a few other individuals that have really been in the background helping us to really understand that bigger potential and the bigger system. Dr. Adrian King, the former head of global exploration for Teck Resources, Brad Mercer, the former COO of Capstone, and Fred Graybill, who's made a career out of porphyry hunting for Asarco. And really, those have been working with us through Chris Dale, who's been acting as a consultant geologist for us for several years now. He stood up with Stephen Quinn up at the Baker Shasta site back in, I think it was 2022. And we were talking about epithermal gold and silver, and Stephen and Chris immediately started talking about porphyry systems. We're lucky now as well that we've attracted Jeff Kaiber to join our team. He's a renowned geologist who is an expert at mapping larger systems, the regional kind of picture. Stephen will get into a little bit more about Jeff and his importance to our program this season. But as you can see here, a company that a few weeks ago was obviously valued a lot less, still had a wealth of talent, and we're looking to really leverage that. And indeed, those world experts now are working with us on an almost day-to-day basis. So it's a really exciting time for us. Next slide. Actually, it's a slide that never changes in our slide deck. It hasn't changed since our inception. It's a slide that explains how we go about active community engagement and working in allyship with the First Nations within whose territories we're privileged to explore. There are 4 First Nations. They have in the past coalesced into 2, the Toltan and the TKN. We're very pleased to continue to work with them. A significant portion of all the dollars we spend goes through their businesses. It's the right thing to do. And the nations themselves know this area better than anyone. So again, that won't change for us. They'll be front and center of everything we do moving forward. It's a bigger opportunity, not just for us, for themselves. And we're looking forward to communicating and working with them to figure out the best way forward so that everyone benefits. And then just quickly then getting into the regional picture, I think a lot of people on this webinar will be familiar with this concept of the Golden Triangle. It encapsulates a lot of the work that's been done over decades within British Columbia. A lot of names there that are now actively mining, but really for us, it's about the amount of dollars that have been spent. You're looking at billions of dollars of exploration that's gone into the Golden Triangle with all the success that we're aware of. Whereas over in the Toodoggone, a lot less dollars have been spent, around $350 million in modern exploration outside of Kemess. We ourselves are a portion of that, around 30 million. With the new dollars that we've got and we'll be spending this year, we'll go over 40 million in expenditures. And then just to emphasize next door, Freeport McMoran and Amart Resources, I think it's a 3 or 4 year program that they're $35 million into. And obviously now leading to the Aurora discovery on our boundary. And then to our northwest, the Thesis Gold ground that contains over 4 million ounces at PEA stage heading to PFS. So it's an exciting district. And then obviously down to the southeast, the Kemess infrastructure sat there under care and maintenance since 2011, $1 billion of infrastructure owned by Centerra. And we understand Centerra will be exploring again this year. And so a lot going on in this district, a lot to play for. And then our neighbors just to our east, Finlay, that have some of the targets that seem to line up with our own, which is exciting. And then Sun Summit, that I think it was their first season really working up there last year, and looking forward to seeing what they're going to do in light of the Aurora discovery this year. So there's a lot going on in our district. It's underexplored. It's been underinvested into. And I think really this is now the opportunity that we see as the lowest hanging fruit in British Columbia. And so just quickly then to zoom in on the specific part of our property that is captured everybody's imagination, and that's Greater Shasta, Newbury, and the Baker Complex. It's over 60 square kilometers. There's known structural controls going through it, and my colleague Stephen will get into that. I just want to emphasize that we do have a mill. We do have a fully winterized camp. It's all road accessible, certainly into the Greater Shasta area. Newbury would be heli access. Trident would be more like heli access. And then right next to Greater Shasta, that Aurora discovery that changed our world on January the 17th. And so looking at that and why it's so exciting, it's right on our boundary. It's a gold-rich copper porphyry discovery. We think we can explain it, but I want to emphasize how close it is to our existing Shasta mineral resource estimate. Over 500,000 ounces in the indicated category, over 500,000 ounces in the inferred category. Every time we drill using modern HQ-oriented core in Shasta, we not only learn more about it, but the grade does seem to go up by about 8 to 14%. And so depending on the cutoff, that indicated grade is around that 1.35 gram mark. The strip ratio looks to us to be very manageable and of the lowest in the area. And there, within the Shasta footprint, there are high-grade lenses that could really be targeted to help form a mine plan, in our opinion, that would yield positive economics. And Shasta itself is located within the only permitted mine area in that northwestern part of the TDG district. So there's a lot of really interesting features. Now, we've known for, since we've been looking at the historical core, and over 65,000 meters was drilled historically across Greater Shasta, Greater Shasta and the Baker Complex. I'll mention Newbury in a second. But what we know within this area between Shasta and the Aurora discovery is there is mineralization, there is gold and silver. It was only ever drilled shallow, and Stephen will get into that and explain. But what I want to emphasize to people is that our plan through 2025 and 2026 was to block and tackle our way to what we were expecting to be over 2 million ounces of epithermal gold and silver within this Greater Shasta footprint, and eventually getting to the boundary, show the positive economics of it, and then earn ourselves the right to take some deeper swings. So go deeper and figure out what was going on underneath. We've woken up and the world has changed, courtesy of the enormous piece of the jigsaw puzzle that was put in right next to us. We're grateful for that. We think they've done some great work and we've learned a lot. And now things have flipped on their head, and what we were planning for 2027, we're now privileged to be able to undertake in 2025. We're going to go about it in a very systematic way. We've got a game plan. It's still being formulated. But before I hand over to my colleague, Stephen, I just want to mention 3 other important features here. At Shasta South, we've always known there was something interesting there, but we were never funded to work on it. There's outcropping down there. We do think that this could be a really important piece of the puzzle, and we've never been funded to undertake IP, so we'll get out there and do that kind of work first off this season. And then just to the north of the Aurora discovery itself, there's an interesting topographical feature here that we think we have an explanation for, and that obviously we need to get out and do more work. And then it would be remiss of me not to mention Newbury, because it's my colleague, Michael Koswine, my fellow director. It's been his favorite target for 2 or 3 years, certainly since he's been involved. We've never had the money to go and do the proper work up there. We've known that there's a gold in soil anomaly sitting over the top of Newbury. It's actually multi-element. The Aurora discovery helps perhaps to explain some of that. And that will also be a priority target. We were always looking and asking ourselves whether Newbury could be another Shasta. Now we're actually asking ourselves if it's not just epithermal, but could there be something more interesting going on there? And literally when Newmont made this discovery in the 1980s, Newbury was the priority. They never got to drill it because they only owned half of it. And so instead they turned around and focused on Shasta. and Shasta was the initial discovery in this part of the Tutagon. So there's a lot going on here. 1 kilometer from us to the boundary, and the furthest west hole that Freeport and Amart drilled, we've calculated at less than 60 meters from our boundary, ending in mineralization, and something that absolutely we're excited to follow up on as we get into this field season, which is literally now only 6 to 8 weeks away. Enough from me until the questions. I'm going to stop the share now and hand over to Stephen.
Sorry, good morning, everyone. Just finding to unmute. Okay, so to get into a little bit of a geological context, here's a cartoon of the stratigraphy of the Baker Shasta area and some of the important features in regards to searching for mineralization. Perhaps the most important thing of note is the unconformity between the Takla group and the Tutagon group mechanics. That's coming in as this red line. This is a large unconformity with an associated basal conglomerate that marks the boundary between the Triassic and Jurassic volcanic activity. The analog to this is the Stuhini-Hazelton and the Golden Triangle. It's very well documented, and our consultant Jeff Kaiba that's joined and Joan Nelson note that within 2 kilometers of this structural feature is host to major deposits and prospects: KSM, Red Chris, Bruce Jack in the Triangle, and Baker, Shasta, Lawyers, Pine, and now Aurora in the Tutagon in and around our area. So we understand the Shasta stratigraphy within the mineral deposit area quite well. Our observations line up with historical efforts of the Tutagon. For simplicity's sake, let's call our mineralized horizons the blue and the purple in the 2 images. And they've been drilled down to about 225 meters vertical depth. As Fletcher mentioned, something interesting is happening at Shasta South, which the Takla is mapped with a basal conglomerate. It's dipping north under Shasta. We estimate that this horizon could be 400 to 500 meters depth below Shasta. Our resource drilling at Shasta was focused on the 2 blue and purple mineralized lithologies, and our drilling was terminated sometimes in mineralization, but was stopped because we applied a NPV per meter metric, and at a depth, conceptual pit would limit the extraction. But that's not to say it's still mineralized at a long strike and a depth, and it's never been drill tested past that 225 meters. From what we understand, we think Aurora is encountered in a package of rocks below the known Shasta mineralization, closer to the red line. There are 3 parts to the lower Tutagon: Saunders, Mid-Santon, and Duncan members. At Shasta, we've observed the Saunders, where mineralization is hosted, and potentially we poked into the Mid-Santon, but we've never encountered the Duncan. From historical and superficial mapping, it seems like the Duncan is the host for this Aurora-style mineralization. It could be sitting underneath Shasta, and it certainly hasn't been tested on our side. So to summarize, you need the right geology to be successful in the Tutagon. If we focus on the eastern side of the Baker Shasta tenure package, the conveniently red line in this map and the black hatched area represent the 2 kilometer buffer from the known mapped locations of this Takla Tutagon unconformity. Stating the obvious, we can see that Baker, Shasta, and Aurora are well within this buffer of favorable location. So 2 years ago, when we began to evaluate our porphyry targets, we considered the distance to red line into account for our ranking. Just walking through our targets, starting at Shasta South and stepping north, we can show the slow simmer of targets we've been building for porphyry style mineralization in the background. Shasta South, Newberry, and let's call it Shasta Deep underneath Shasta. These are 3 targets that are very close and, for argument's sake, drill ready. And we are potentially going to drill a combination of them this summer. They've been worked up over the last couple of years and nearly have all the pieces ready for a drill test. We're calling Aurora West has graduated into this category, and testing the extensions of the mineralized system at Aurora is necessary. The rest kind of follow pearls on a string. They have some historical data, and they were previously flagged as high areas of interest from our 2023 lithic drainage sampling efforts. They've now moved to the next step of exploration to collect the additional data to hopefully, at the end of 2025, reprioritize these many of them or all of them into the same kind of bucket that we see Shasta South, Newberry, Shasta Deep, and Aurora West, and potentially drill test in 2026, 2027. So we've developed a targeting model and we have a pipeline of targets to explore. And these targets are in a 12-kilometer long kind of structural corridor, which I'll touch on. So zooming into Shasta and Aurora and how it fits together, there's an important and obvious northwest structural pattern to the district with deposits and prospects along this trend, notably Shasta right there, the Comess open pit, Comess North, Pine, Lawyers, Baker. These structures are thought to be deep-seated crustal faults, tapping mineralized fluids at depths. There's this discussion about the paragenesis of these faults, whether they are pre, post, or syn mineral, and understanding those structural controls outside of Shasta is going to be a key focus for our 2025 exploration. There's also a northeast indication of structural orientation or fabric, the most evident in the clusters of the northern Comess deposits south of us. It may also serve as a key control for intrusive emplacement and porphyry mineralization. So what is important is the intersection of these features can create dilation zones, and this gives the space and permeability for mineralizing fluids to accumulate. So the key takeaway is that you need the right structural regime, which is district scale and documented, and it's ideally cross-cut by northeast or to a lesser extent east-west structures. So this is 2017 airborne magnetics, and what we're looking for is that a magnetite-rich core is a good starting point to search for porphyry-style copper-gold mineralization. Using this airborne geophysics as another layer, we looked at those ranked targets shown here again through this 12-kilometer structural corridor. And here are the same 8 targets in Aurora, demonstrating kind of on echelon, left stepping, north trending pearls on the string. Some of the displacement and some of the left step could be due to these northeast, east-west cross faults inside the structural corridor, which makes these targets very interesting to follow up on. This is just the targets in this 12-kilometer structural corridor. As Fletcher said, we might have a series of webinars. If you look to the southwest of this image, that big magnetic feature is the Duncan Pluton. And if you start looking at the edges of the Duncan Pluton, you're seeing similar kind of mag bullseyes around there. There are also areas of interest. So again, the takeaway is we have another layer that is favorable to porphyry copper gold exploration. You need the right geophysics, you need the right geology, and you need the right structure. And this corridor kind of lights up and checks all 3 boxes. So if we zoom into Shasta, this illustrates our starting point, and it just reiterates how impressive this golden soil anomaly is. The darker red circles represent 200 ppb golden soil or greater, and the area is about 1.5 kilometers by 1.5 kilometers. Newberry to the north also has an impressive golden soil anomaly. The drilling in the Greater Shasta area historically did encounter mineralization. The modern geophysics we did, the MAG VLF in 2022 and 2023, suggests the drilling could be oriented better to hit some of the structures. For more gold mineralization, as Fletcher said, the Greater Shasta area has more potential in itself. But nevertheless, this large golden soil anomaly represents a good starting point, and it would leave many people jealous to have the starting point that we have. So looking at some other elements and how it relates to the porphyry that we're looking for now, this is showing copper and soil anomaly, but really the moly and sulfur kind of mimic this pattern. If we think about porphyry style mineralization and the search for it, we investigate moly, copper, and sulfur. The best proxy to copper gold porphyry might be Mr. Copper, and a porphyry is essentially just a big sulfur and soil anomaly. So we can see that there's something developing in the south at the extent of our data limits that's pointing to a moly, copper, and sulfur anomaly in soil towards South Shasta. These concentrations are muted, and by some exploration standards, they may be classified as weak. But knowing that the porphyry style mineralization at Aurora is within the older Duncan member of the Lower Toodoggone, Shasta has 2 subsequent volcanic events, the Mitsanton and Saunders on top. So it's no surprise that there is not huge copper numbers coming out of the soils right on top and around Shasta. This is thought that the presence of copper is suggestive of a leakage halo from something below or close by to Shasta. Shasta itself is a low sulfidation epithermal deposit that's quartz calcite zone. So that kind of represents the tops of these epithermal systems, which you'd expect more distal from a porphyry. So it would be expected that the copper and sulfur be poor or absent, but with the fact that we do see it suggests that something interesting is going on, not only south of Shasta, but below Shasta. So here's a couple images from our neighbors that are published in the 2023 ARIS report. Magnetotellurics is a good tool for detecting low resistivity zones that can be associated with sulfides. This is the 200 meter below surface model. You can see the Aurora discovery shows response to this low resistivity. But interestingly, on the part that was not masked to the property boundary, we can see zones of low resistivity that are starting to go over top of our already picked targets. We have ZTEM over the whole Baker Shasta block. ZTEM is another tool that can measure conductivity resistivity. We've sent the geophysics off to a geophysical firm to reprocess in light of what we've learned over the last 2 years about the structure, the geology, and the controls of the mineralization, and what we think we know about Aurora and the surrounding area. IP is a useful tool for detecting disseminated sulfides in porphyry exploration. The Baker Shasta area has very limited low depth, and we're talking 25 feet penetration over some of the old Baker epithermal veins. For argument's sake, there's no IP over the entire property. Our neighbors have illustrated that induced polarization is an effective tool for discovering these sulfide systems. We intend to use this tool as another layer of our exploration this year. The obvious is to focus on these zones in black, these near Shasta zones, and then extend the lines out along the corridor through some of the other defined targets. So that kind of takes us to the 2025 work plan. We're fully funded for the next phase. Like I said, we're going to complete the geophysics, the IP, in and around the greater Shasta area and those targets near the border and around the border. We're going to follow up with a combination of drilling in our Aurora West target and our other drill ready, the Shasta South, the Shasta Deep, and the Newberry, some combination of those. But yeah, that involves drilling deeper at Shasta to test that lithology at depth. Our timing, we think we can get things going by mid to late May. We're going to try to send the camp crew out near the start of May if the snow is favorable for getting going, get the IP done sometime by the end of May, and hopefully start testing with the drill bit as soon as we can after that. And just reminding everybody that we are hunting porphyry style mineralization, but the Shasta deposit in Greater Shasta is still a great place to continue looking. So it'd be a big bonus if we hit some epithermal gold mineralization along the way to finding our porphyry mineralization. And I will pass.
Yeah, leave that up, please, Steve. That's okay. Don't wait. I can do it. That's fine. So thank you, Stephen. Look, hopefully people can see my screen. All of our existing geophysics has now gone off for reprocessing and reinterpretation in light of the Aurora discovery. So hopefully that's what we're hoping is going to be the focus of the next webinar or webinars that we're able to do. We're running rapidly towards the field season, as Stephen mentioned, looking to mobilize in early May and get things going as soon as possible thereafter. I wanted to put this slide up because I think this is what it's all about. This is why we think that we offer a compelling investment opportunity right now. It's a Lassonde curve. I know many of the people participating in this webinar will be aware of it. And I just want to focus on this part of the curve, which is that concept phase, which can last 4 to 5 years. No surprise, TDG listed in December 2020, and the first exploration that we undertook was in 2021. So our version of this curve takes that into consideration. So if you go back that 4 or 5 years, you get to our reverse takeover, which is how we listed our listing event in 2020. Our Shasta rediscovery did result in a revaluation. I think a lot of people on this call will be aware of that the sector has been through a tough period since August, I think, 2022. We're no exception to that. We've never stopped believing. We've never stopped working to try and show that Shasta has that potential to be over 2+ million ounces. But we find ourselves now, we think, at the Aurora discovery point. That's the end of the concept phase. We do categorize in our minds the Aurora discovery as exactly that, a proof of concept. And so where we're headed now as a company is into that really exciting period of the Lassonde curve, which is all about discovery. That's who we are as a company. And we're uniquely placed with a combination of world experts, an existing resource, the infrastructure, the only Mines Act permit in the district, a board that consists of people who have been there and done that, but also now, thankfully, the dollars courtesy of the strategic investment by Skeena Gold and Silver that hopefully now enable us to accelerate through that discovery phase. It can take 1 to 2 years. We're going for it this year. And we're very pleased that people are excited enough to want to attend a webinar with us today as we begin what is now going to be, for us, the most exciting period of TDG's existence. So thank you very much, and we'd be pleased to answer some questions.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I do have a couple of questions for you, so that's great. First question I'll actually throw to you, Fletcher, if that's all right. Have you spoken to local First Nations groups about the Aurora discovery? And if so, what have their views been so far?
Yeah, it's a great question. Aurora was January the 17th. It coincided with one of the major conferences in Vancouver. Every year, companies are invited to present to the First Nation groups. We were no exception. It was obviously hot off the press at that moment. And so we were able to try to articulate it as based on our understanding at that particular moment. We did say that we would revert back to all the nations to obviously understand what it is that they would like to see happen, how and when, and obviously give ourselves the time to make our own plans and digest the new information and reinterpret the geophysics, etc. That's a work in progress. We do everything through our VP Sustainability, Christy Smith. She's a thought leader in the industry. I do encourage participants in the webinar to look up Christy. She's a published author and an MBA holder, as well as being of First Nation heritage herself. She guards our vision and our implementation of that vision in terms of interfacing with the First Nations. I've said that's the one slide in our deck that never changes. We will not deviate from that. And so you'll see us now increasing in our interface with the nations as we stride forward to that field season. And we're hoping that they'll want to be integral and intimately involved in everything that we're doing. And we look forward to that.
Awesome. No, appreciate that extra context. Stephen, I got one for you. How much work do you expect to complete on the porphyry targets outside of Greater Shasta and Newberry?
The short answer is we're going to let the science drive it. Over the last couple of years, we've had a model that we're going to build a pipeline of targets, and you're starting to see the first kind of iterations of this pipeline. So we have the near Shasta and Newberry near drill ready. Going to drill some combination of it this summer. The remaining targets on that kind of string of pearls, the science is going to dictate how much work we do and seasonal timing. But then I left the hint that there are other targets that are not as far along that we're going to work up. So hopefully this time next year, we'll have a webinar and I'll be showing those targets on the Baker side that are now graduating. So that's our plan, is to graduate targets as the science dictates.
That's great. And certainly look forward to that webinar as well. Fletcher, I got one for you. I know TDG said for at least 2 years, as I understand it, that you believe Greater Shasta could hold 2+ million ounces. I'm curious if you're going to continue to work on it this season, or are you only looking for copper gold right now?
It's a great question, and we keep getting asked this. The short answer is we're in discovery mode, and we're looking for gold-rich copper porphyries. The slightly longer answer is, if indeed that Aurora-type mineralization does extend underneath Greater Shasta towards Shasta itself, then Stephen can probably say it better than me or explain it better than myself, but we'll be drilling through some of that potential epithermal mineralization as we go deeper to test what's going on underneath. So I think at the very least, we're going to learn about what may be in that top 225 meters. There are historical drill holes that do hint that there's more of that epithermal style mineralization with veins that's vein hosted or breccia hosted. So we're excited about it. I'm not going to say right now that we are going to be able to block and tackle our way to that magic 2 million ounces this season, but there's a glint in my eye, and we're a creative team. And actually the advent of Skeena Gold and Silver getting involved with us, I think adds some additional strength on that front. Watch this space, I think, is my tongue-in-cheek answer.
Great. Nope. Appreciate that. Stephen, I got one for you. AU West could be structurally complicated, but there does appear to be outcropping to the south of Shasta. So is that your actual exploration priority, and when do you plan to drill it?
There's no question that the structural story is a key part of exploration in and around Shasta. The Tutagon has long suffered from lack of dollars, and those lack of dollars has equated into very piecemeal work in and around that area. So our key priority is understanding the structure in AU West, and then applying that knowledge going outward in, I guess, arcs for intents and purposes to Shasta South. When we expect to drill it, when we have the seasonal window, and when the science tells us it's ready to put a drill test on it, which hopefully will be in the earlier part of the season.
Follow the science. Like to hear it. Fletcher, I got one for you. Centerra owns KMS, and to my eyes, the infrastructure there is currently, to put it plainly, doing kind of nothing. Have you spoken to them about getting more involved in your part of the Tutagon?
Gosh, that's a great question. The short answer is yes. They visited our property. I know all interface has been on a technical level.
Sure.
I know that they've been looking at what's been going on up in our part of the corridor. I did see an announcement a few weeks ago that they are now prioritizing exploration around the season, but also Mount Milligan is an anchor project for Centerra. I guess I'd say we're surprised that they haven't been more aggressive in our part of the Tutagon. The door is always open to those kind of dialogues. They know the district. They know what's going on there. They know the history of how KMS was discovered. And as Stephen has mentioned, the number of parallels that we're seeing between Aurora, Greater Shasta, Newbury, and what has gone on at KMS are striking. So I think we're open to all of those kind of dialogues, and really intrigued to see how they reprioritize KMS within their own portfolio moving forward.
Great. I'll stick with you, Fletcher, for the next one, actually. The gold grades at your Mets mining lease are, to my eyes, the best in the district. I know plenty of investors were expecting you to drill it last season. So curious, why didn't you? And what are your plans for Mets this season?
Simple answer, cost. We were able to raise dollars last year. We were faced with a tough set of decisions as to exactly how to prioritize. And just to applaud Stephen and his technical team, they don't do things that they can't do properly. And that we set our stall out like that from the very beginning. Do the proper work. We're not interested in trying to show how many ounces are here or there. We really want everything to fit into what we expect to be, or certainly on the epithermal side, an economic picture. And Mets is no exception to that. But you're absolutely right. Shallow, high-grade gold intercepts from near surface in what's classified as a developed prospect, meaning that there was underground development. And I think from memory, the development rock itself graded something like 6 grams a ton. So it's a really exciting prospect. It's actually a mining lease. It's located, it's road connected. But to answer your question, look, we would love to get up there and test some of those targets. Even Stephen's smiling at that. Stephen, feel free to comment, but I think you would agree that all of the epithermal systems in our area are somehow related to porphyry targets. The idea that you could be drilling deeper and maybe test something in Mets is intriguing, but I come back to the fact that if you're going to do it properly, and Mets itself not only deserves the proper dollars and the proper systematic exploration, it's actually going to be what's needed. We can say, and we can go off and we could stick a hole here and there. It's not our style. We're really systematic explorationists. And like Stephen has said very well, the battle rhythm and everything we do is driven by the science, and we won't deviate from that.
Great. Stephen, I do have a question for you, actually. Obviously, answer to the best of your ability here, but how actively involved is Skeena in your work planning?
How active would I like them? Lots. But the Skeena is very busy with building their SK mine.
Of course.
So we're still at the figuring out how to integrate Skeena's expertise into our model and of how to explore. But that's at their rhythm.
No, appreciate that. Stephen, I'll stick with you for the last question I got here, which is what's your timeline for exploring the copper gold porphyry targets in 2025?
So just to reiterate, in a perfect world that the weather cooperates with us, we'd like to get up there start of May, get the camp open around mid-May to get the geophysics going. If the slopes are free of snow, we can get out and start mapping and looking at those structures. But if they're not, the IP doesn't really care about the snow, we can still do it. And then it'll be getting mapping, it'll be understanding the structure and picking drill targets. That'd be the ideal scenario.
Awesome. Gentlemen, thank you so much for the presentation, running through all these questions today, going through grilling. I always appreciate it very much. Dr. Fletcher, I'll throw it to you for last words just before we jump. If anybody, last words to the investors in the room before we head out for the afternoon.
Yeah, look, firstly, a thank you to all the investors that stuck with us over the last few years. I know that I believe there are some attending today, so thank you for that. The next phase is obviously the most exciting that we will have encountered. We're funded for this next stage of exploration. We've got that world-class team that's totally locked in and assisting us. The Skeena Gold and Silver investment is super exciting. It is strategic. It's also tactical. They're a creative and agile group of explorationists who have had tremendous success. And as Stephen has mentioned, we'd like them to be as involved as they want to be, but obviously we're respectful that they're busy and they've got other things. We say to them, welcome to the Tutagon, or should we say welcome back? They were up there in 2022 exploring on the Sophia property that we acquired as part of that investment package with them. So we know them and we know how talented they are. Just in general, the Tutagon is underexplored. The Tutagon has been underinvested. It's attracting attention now for all the right reasons. We get it. There's a lot to play for up there. It's not just the epithermal now. It's that gold-rich copper porphyry systems. We've always believed we're part of a bigger system, and we're now super excited to get up there and crack on with the work. And I would say to everybody, watch this space.